Hi, everybody. Welcome to Parents Tool Talk. And this month I'm doing something a little bit different. I am inviting a longtime friend and colleague, Debbie Farr, to come and share with you her new book, which is Enrich Your Relationship with Your Child. I've been cheering on Debbie as she's been writing her book and was really excited as she was ready to publish that, and it's available on Amazon, and she will tell you that. And as I read it, there were just so many, of course, similarities because, we wouldn't be such, colleagues if we didn't think so much
Right,
alike. But yet
right.
also so many things that I really liked. For those of you, who know my book and it's big and it's, got lots in there, there's a lot it doesn't have. But I'll tell you what, Debbie has covered some topics and has an angle on some of these topics that I was really intrigued by. And I said, Debbie, will you come on? I want to talk to you more about some of those. And so I'm going to let Debbie introduce herself. And then where you can kind of pick up with my question, my first question is going to be like, why did you decide to write a book? How did you? But give them a little bit of a background. We're actually in several organizations together, some national parent ed, family life coach, educator organizations. And
Right.
actually, here's coming someone on right now. So go ahead, Debbie, start with your introduction.
Okay, very good. Yes, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for listening in. My name is Debbie Farr. You'll see that my book actually says Kruenegel-Farr. That's because I used my hyphenated legal name. Yeah, I decided to write this book because I had just finished up my PhD. Um, Raised three sons. I worked in a variety of family and parent related businesses. I worked for family resource centers, did home visiting. I've taught at all levels in the schools, done individual one on one work with parents and families. So that combined with my research, if you will, my master's and PhD, things kind of started to fall into place. Then I started doing workshops, either because it was part of my job or because I was asked to or the opportunity was there. And to prepare for the workshops, I started putting things together and it kind of fell into a RICE acronym, RICE. But then I would have people afterwards coming up and saying, oh, is that kind of like the rest, elevation, ice kind of thing? It's like, oh, no, that's not what I meant with rice. So it's like, I have to come up with something different. So then I decided respect was really important. I wanted to focus on that. So it became RICER. Well, that's just not a catchy acronym. It worked for a while. I did a number of workshops with RICER as the key. Um, as I began to pull more into the book, um, it was pretty obvious there were other things that I wanted to add in. And when I started kind of playing around with it, as you and I were joking earlier, we consider ourselves acronym queens. Um, Enrich just happened. I mean, it just kind of fell into place. And especially because my book really is all about enriching that relationship. And those 14 strategies that start with E.N.R.I.C.H just happen to be enriching kinds of things. So that's kind of how I got there. Not everything fit perfectly. That's why I have another additional chapter in the book. Yeah. So, and right now, I do teach positive psychology at the college level, and I have my own business, Flourishing Families. So that's a little bit about me in the book.
Yeah, well, and that's great. And yeah, those of you who are familiar with Parents Tool Shop, prior to Debbie calling herself the acronym queen, I probably would have been willing to get in a competition for the role. But it does make it easy to remember. And I love the fact there's a couple things you said that really are validating. One is that it just kind of evolved and happened that way. I know the
Right.
system that I teach is it kind of evolved, and through developing and living it, it just kind of evolved. And then for it to kind of have that dual purpose of enrich and to be able to, kind of use that's just perfect. So
Yeah.
let's go ahead and show them what enrich is. Now, I think you all know that we're not going to to have time in 1 hour to go in depth with all 14, but I did ask, that I do want you all to know what all 14 are. And then I've asked Debbie to cover about three or four that we thought, as I was reading, I'm like, I really want you to go into this. So go ahead and share with them what Enrich stands for, and then we'll start to dive into a few of those.
All right. So this is the Enrich acronym: encouragement, empathy, naming emotions, negatives, respect, redirection, reasoning, identity, involvement, communication, consequences, humor, health, and happiness. And I have to tell you, I was so excited when I discovered that I was going to be able to start my book with encouragement and end my book with happiness. I mean, it just, like I said, it all just started to fall into place really nicely, which was really exciting for me. None of these were ones that I had to sit and think, what can I talk to them about that starts with C? I mean, literally, all of these are strategies that parents can use to enrich their relationship with their child. Encouragement is one of those from Alfred Adler: encourage, encourage, encourage. I mean, there's nothing better you can do for your child, really. Empathy, I do go into the difference between empathy and sympathy, which I think we're all becoming more familiar with, although I do find you can be familiar with it. It doesn't mean you know how to have empathy or that you're very good at it. Naming emotions is one that's gotten a lot of attention over the years, which is great. I do make a point in the book of expressing my very firm opinion that naming emotions happens for both boys and girls. We as a society have gotten very used to girls telling us what they think and feel. But we are really needing to make sure we do that. My husband and I raised 3 sons. And so this became very obvious too as we were raising our sons. But the negatives, I'm sorry, Jody, go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, naming emotions is such a critical aspect of emotional development, emotional intelligence, and I work a lot with children who have been traumatized, of helping to heal and self-regulation, being able to calm and be able to communicate those emotions and be in touch with your emotions is just really important.
Right, right. And feeling that it's okay to do this.
Yeah.
So the negatives and respect, we'll get into that just a little bit more. The redirection is as simple as it sounds, just redirecting behavior. And although it's typically used for younger children, truth be told, it can be used on spouses. It can be used on adult children. It can be used in a variety of situations. So I go into more detail about the redirecting. Reasoning is, of course, what you would expect it to be, helping our children understand the reasons behind what we say, how
Without the
we're thinking,
lectures. And that's what
without
I
the
really
lecture.
loved. There's so much about the book we're not going to be able to say, but one of the things I really appreciated so much is, and you all know balanced parenting. I coined the term, which is now like the official, terminology. But there's so much that's in the balance zone in the way that Debbie presents stuff, and the reasoning was one of those. It's like, yes, you need to give. It's helpful for kids to understand why, but to not go on and on and on and turn it into a lecture, which is then counterproductive.
Yeah, yeah. And that I always relay back to that what we used to call the tape in your head. I don't know what we call it now, but if that's how you were raised, that's your inner voice. That's the inner speech that you hear is the lecture. And so then as parents, we just get into lecture mode. So yeah, yeah. Hopefully that reasoning is, here are my reasons. Hopefully they're thought through. Anyway, the identity is several different pieces thrown together, but just helping your child become who they are meant to be. I know when I was little, my mom, in the worst way, wanted me to play the piano. And she was very lucky. I did too. But I just remember that sense of, I need to play the piano and I need to be good at it. Identity is created by the child finding out what it is they enjoy, who they are, and how they think and feel. So just a little bit of helping them along that process. Involvement in the book, I go into the various types of parenting, the authoritative, the dictator style, parenting style, that kind of thing. But then also just talking about finding that fine line between being over involved and under involved, and allowing the child to tell us, especially as they get into adolescent and teen years, allowing them to tell us when our involvement needs to back off a little. And my boys were pretty clear with that. Mom, you do not need to go on all the field trips. Communication, lots of strategies in this book are going to be something that you're familiar with from other things, maybe even from communication workshops you might have had in your own employment. It's active listening more than talking, that kind of thing. So consequences, as I joke in the book, this is probably the section everybody turns to first. Okay, tell me what to do when this behavior happens. I basically cover logical and natural consequences. So the key really with consequences is, does it fit with what's going on? Because if it's just go to your room, or that's it, you don't get allowance this week, does it fit? Because if not, it's not helping redirect or teach, which is ultimately the purpose behind those consequences, is to
Yeah.
teach something
If it
different.
doesn't make sense, then they're not going to learn.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. Because all they think of is punishment.
Hmm.
And that's not what a consequence should be. The humor, happiness, like I said, we'll delve into just a little bit more. The health one, I'm not going to talk too much about right now. It is what you think it would be, and mental health. I think that's one thing that sometimes people forget. Um, yep, we want to make sure they get good sleep. We want to make sure they're eating well, that they get their exercise. But we also want to make sure the mental health is there. That as parents, if we can't deal with things that they might be going through, that we get them help to deal what they might be going through. So,
Great. Great.
and just very quickly, the book then does end with a couple of chapters, one on dealing with trauma. So, as I was finishing the book, COVID was around, and as we all know, mental health issues are huge now because of COVID. But there were also major hurricanes, major wildfires. There was flooding. So everybody has their own trauma, or I should say, all parts of the country deal with their own kinds of weather related trauma. But then there's trauma within communities, and certainly within the, the health, the medical angle. There's also a section on being resilient and self compassion. As parents, we like to beat ourselves up. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. Um, why didn't I think of that before, etc. So I did want to throw in a bit of self-compassion, so included some of Kristen Neff's work on that. Additional examples of strategies is the first appendix in my book. The reason I did this is because my examples throughout the book are specific age groups. So I might have an example of a 3-year-old or a 7-year-old or a 14-year-old or whatever. Well, that's great for that one example, but how would this particular strategy look for someone at a different age? So I throw in some additional examples at the end, as well as very basic developmental information. Many times in the book, I will say something like, age appropriately, of course. Well, if you don't know what's age appropriate, that doesn't make sense. So I did throw that in at the end of the book. So, all right, very
Very
good.
comprehensive. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I
All
do
right.
want to welcome Harriet, who is another fellow parenting author here, who also, and so welcome, Harriet. Glad to have you here. All right, so let's dive in a little bit because when I first saw the book and I saw the negatives, I was like, huh? That was one that to me was not, most of the rest, I think, given my background, I was like, okay, I kind of know what that's going to be about. This one was like, negatives. Why would I want to have negatives in parenting? And so I specifically asked if we could cover this one because I really loved where this chapter led.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Jody. This is one of those that actually comes directly from positive psychology. Um, the focus is not on the negative, but how you can incorporate the negative and still maintain. So when we work with the negatives or help our child learn how to work with their negatives, that allows them to build self-esteem. Look, that
Let me
was a
back you
problem.
up.
I solved it.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm going to back you up. Define what the negatives are.
Anything in life for the child that's going to feel like a problem. Okay. So it's a problem that comes up and they don't know how to solve it. In fact, when I work with families, one of my favorite questions to ask is, whose responsibility do you think this is? Because many times as parents, we decide, oh, there's a problem. I've got to go talk to their teacher. Oh, he's having a problem with his homework. I've got to help him. Oh no, you've got to have this finished by tomorrow. All right, well, go to bed. I'll finish working on it for you. Those are negatives, right? Those are things that happen. Now, I'm giving softball examples. There are also definitely some very difficult ones. In fact, I'm going to read an example from the book where it's something that they really are struggling with, and they need help. They need support on working through that negative. So does that help?
Yes, because yeah, I wanted to first of all frame that. And for those of you who are familiar not only with Parents Tool Shop, but what Parents Tool Shop references for that, the very first question in the Universal Blueprint is whose problem is it? Which goes back to PET, Thomas Gordon, problem ownership. And so those examples that you gave are really perfect in terms of those were all child problems. Just because it's a problem doesn't mean it's our problem to solve. And so, yes, looking at when what I would call child problems in Parents Tool Shop language lingo would be
Right.
child problems, how we can support children in dealing with those without necessarily taking over if we step in, how much to step in. That's kind of what this is about.
Exactly, exactly. In fact, one of the things I do talk about in the book is we don't want to swoop in because we literally take away that skill building that they gain from working through their own problem. There are exceptions. If we're talking about a serious problem, absolutely we've got to be there and work with them to kind of incorporate those negatives and flip it around just a little bit. So that whole process really helps them build resilience, which means then later in life, they're going to know how to solve the problems because they've already had experience doing it. So we really kind of try to reframe the negatives. I don't remember the exact quote I put in the book from Oprah Winfrey, but something, it's the mountains and the valleys. You can't get up to the top of the mountain without going through the valleys, that kind of thing. But we reframe what it is that we're going through and help our children learn to reframe by saying, what can I learn from this? What can I do differently next time so this problem doesn't happen? So now, in this situation, we do need to take into account the age of the child and that nature, like I mentioned, the nature of that negative situation. So let me read this one example that I have because it's a little bit more of a serious situation, but I think it describes perfectly what it is that I'm talking about. Ty is 11 and his sister Aya is age 12. They both lived with their mother and grandparents in their grandparents' home. Ty and Aya's father had been deployed overseas, and their mom, Aika, worked nights as a nurse. After much discussion, the parents decided it made best sense for Aika and the children to move in with her parents so the children would have someone at home consistently. Although they initially wanted the grandparents to move in with them, grandfather had mobility issues and needed to stay in his own adapted home. This was not a popular decision for Ty and Aya, as it meant they weren't able to sleep in their own beds, stay in their own neighborhood, see their own friends. Not only that, but now their father was no longer around. So the initial 2 weeks were spent trying to get everything organized. By the third week, reality had set in, and the kids were clearly not happy. Mom, this stinks, said Ty. All my friends are going to James's house tonight. James was right next door to us, but now it feels like he's a million miles away. I'm never going to make any friends here. I miss where we used to live. He was clearly upset, and Aika totally understood. I know, honey, it does stink. I know James was one of your best friends. I'm so sorry you won't be able to hang with your friends tonight. I know this is tough for you, but I'm proud of the way you're hanging in there with everything, and I'm really glad you're talking to me about how you're feeling. Can you think of something you might be able to do to help you through this? So, just stopping there a little bit, here's mom's way of supporting. She's showing empathy. She's actually appreciating the fact that he's expressing his emotions, but she's not telling him, oh, buck up. Oh, you'll get used to it. Oh, get over it. You'll make new friends. She's not demonstrating what he needs to do. She's just listening right now and responding with empathy.
And then
So,
asking an open-ended question. Can you
yes,
think of some ideas? Which,
yes,
and the other piece of this is, and you emphasized what she started out with first, which is so important because, yes, we're either often using those roadblocks, of denying the feelings or whatever, or we're rushing them, either giving advice or, jumping over to the solution prior to
right,
empathizing. And it's that empathy and acknowledging the feelings that helps de-escalate some of the drama and helps people feel understood, brings the brain back online so that
yes.
then when you ask a logical question, they actually can start to think logically. We've
Eggs.
supported them in that self-regulation.
Right. And like you said, there's a bit of time and distance, if you will, from the initial frustration to any sort of solution so that you can really work through it with them. Yeah.
And when you say time, I mean, the time that it took for you to read that was less than a minute. I mean,
Yeah.
so we're not talking like this is going to take a half hour to get to a solution. I mean,
Right.
when you're skillful at developing these skills, and the more you master them, there's kind of an art as well as a skill to it, that you can kind of flow in that direction. You're helping to support them and working through the emotions, then identifying the issue, and then yeah, it
Right.
actually can flow fairly quickly.
Exactly. Oh gosh, yes. Especially if you can tell that the child feels heard,
Hmm.
then it can move quickly. So yeah. So mom had said, "Can you think of something you might do to help you through this?" Ty sighed and thought, "Not really," he said with a frown. "I just really want to be with my friends and have things the way they were." I totally get that, Ty. But since that can't happen, I wonder if there isn't some different opportunity for you here. I know you're a smart boy and can come up with some great ideas. Things don't always work the way we want them to, but sometimes that's what helps us find new things or people to enjoy. So it was clear Ty was giving this all some thought. And after another minute or two, he said, Mom, what would Dad do? That's an interesting thought and a great question, Ty. It's always good to get advice for a problem. Why don't you ask him when he calls home tonight? Yeah, I think I will, he said. But in the meantime, maybe I'll just ask Grandfather if he can show me how to play that game he played when he was a kid. I love that idea, said Aika. And I'm really proud of you for thinking this through and coming up with some positives instead of just the negatives. Good thinking, Ty. So, in that example, you can see how it is clearly a negative, and this is one that Ty really needs support in. You can't just blow this off because this is real. For all we know, the mom is feeling kind of the same way, right? So,
Yeah.
helping them work through the negatives really helps. And she was able, because Ty was old enough, he's 11, she was able to talk it through with him. So, again, that's why I say make sure it's age appropriate. Um, uh, don't expect the 2-year-old to talk through things like that an 11-year-old would. So, and again, then obviously, as we said before, we don't want as parents to swoop in and save the day because every time we do that, we do two things. We convince them they can't do it by themselves, and we put more on our own plate that doesn't need to be there. So, we do, however, want to offer our support. Hey, if you can't figure this out, come back and let's talk about this again. The other thing that I really I think is important, and sometimes as parents we forget, is to follow up. Once something has been done or decided, follow up and ask them, hey, how did that go? I really liked what you had come up with. Did that work? So allow them do overs. That's important. And don't expect them to solve this exactly the way you would. That's also part of the learning process. So, for those of you who might be listening to this, just think of something that you learned the hard way. How did the negative of the situation help you learn? And do you think you would have learned the lesson as well if someone had told you what to do? And of course, you can tell where I'm going with this. When we can personalize it and help us remember kind of, well, what worked for me, that helps us then know how to work with our child on that. So, great. Okie doke. The next one that I wanted to cover is respect. It's not just about child to parent. Let me repeat that. It's not just about the child being respectful to adults. It's about a parent or any adult being respectful to a child. So that's, I think, one of the reasons when Jody and I were talking earlier too, we really feel this is an important piece for parents to understand. When you talk with them, that shows them respect. When you talk at them or interrupt them, that does not show respect. So we want to allow for their input. We want to listen when they talk. In the book, I put listen. If you rearrange the letters for listen, it's silent. And that's really when we stay silent, kids will fill in the blanks. And that's when we can know how to help them better. So when we listen, we also need to make sure we are listening fully. So it's that eye to eye, one to one, not multitasking, and not doing something that I accuse my husband of all the time. But yeah, but wait, but no, but wait. Oh, so are you done? Can I talk now? That's what he does to me sometimes when I'm talking, and it's so annoying. When we do that to kids, clearly we're thinking of what it is that we want to say rather than allowing them to say what they need to say. Us listening, reflecting to make sure we heard correctly, and then moving forward. So that's respectful conversation. I also tell parents, do not be afraid to say, I'm sorry. Number one, that's great modeling. I will never forget the time when one of my sons came to me. He was adolescent teen, I think like right around in the 13, 14, 15 age. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't talk to you very well last night. I was kind of disrespectful. I almost fell over. But it was just so wonderful to hear because he had heard me say, I'm sorry, I wish I hadn't yelled. I'm sorry that didn't work the way we had talked. Let me explain what happened. So the I am sorry is a great, first of all, I call it a great I message, but it's also a great way to be respectful and human, right? So we have to model respect for our kids to learn it. They will not learn it by being told, you need to show some respect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you can't demand respect. You really need to earn it. And it's modeled. If we don't like it when kids are always looking at their phones, but yet if we're always looking at ours,
yeah,
there's this saying in the parents' tool shop that if we were to treat our friends the way we usually treat our children, we probably wouldn't have many friends.
no,
Likewise, if we were to treat our children with the respect that we usually afford our friends, not that they are our friends, but that
right,
friendly respect, we
right.
would probably be more connected and get more respect from our children.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and that's a good point, Jody, because we're not saying you need to be your child's friend to give or get respect. Um, but you can certainly be friendly and respectful.
Yes.
And
Well,
yeah,
and they're completely different parenting styles. You know, being mutual respect is within the balanced or parenting style, where being your child's best friend tends to be more in the permissive side of
yes,
things. I mean, there's two different kinds, but that it tends to be more permissive in that, and in that we're not respecting ourselves or our role as parents either, and that we allow disrespect often. And so this is mutual respect. And it's also not just giving it, but that we also are assertive in terms of expecting to be respected, but not demanding it, which would be over on that power patrol, autocratic side.
yeah, exactly. In fact, one of the things that in the previous slide I talked about allowing them to do over for negatives. And the same thing goes for respect. It's very, I was going to say it's very easy. It's not sometimes, especially if we get flustered or angry. Nothing is easy then. But there is a great way to handle this by simply saying, that felt disrespectful to me. Would you like to try again? And that's just a respectful way of handling something. But to your point, Jody, I expect respect as well. So I know I worked with a family where they were having difficulties with the 3-year-old hitting and kicking mom, and she was kind of just taking it because she didn't want to squash expressing emotions. That can be said, no, this is disrespectful. You cannot hurt my body. So the respect is shown that way as well. So
And I
one
love
of the things,
do-overs. I think every parent gets do-overs, and every kid. I like the opportunity to do a do-over. Yeah.
yeah,
Would you like to
yeah,
try that again? Which is
right.
also, and if we can stay calm when we say it, it's like, I'm not going to respond to that. Would you like to ask nicely? You know? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Oh, yikes. There must be something going on because what you just said kind of hurt. Do you want to reword that just a little bit? Yeah.
And not take it
Um,
so personal.
yeah, because I know I've said things before to people and then realized later, oh my gosh, it was because I was nervous or angry or tired or whatever.
Yeah.
Same thing happens to kids, right? That's what the halt is all about: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. But
Yeah.
anyway, one of the things that I put in the book that hopefully is a good example for people was I was out blueberry picking one time, and a lady had her kids with her, and they were having great conversation. It was actually kind of fun to eavesdrop. It wasn't intentional, but I could hear them in the next row over as the kids were talking. But as kids will do, okay, well, what's next? They had picked some blueberries. They were ready to do the next thing. So they started going down the aisles and then hollering at each other, come down here, see what I found down here, that kind of stuff. Mom walked over to them, and in a regular voice, well, she wasn't whispering or anything, but a regular voice, she said, boys, I know it feels, we're outside. I totally get why you're doing this, but we still need to use our indoor voices because other people are out here picking blueberries and they don't necessarily need to hear the games that you're playing. Well, that really got my attention. And I thought, well, that was pretty cool. Well, the boys responded wonderfully, and then you could hear them just chatting again. It was actually really cute. Sure enough, bit by bit, those voices raised, and then one went 2 rows over, and they started to holler again. Mom stopped what she was doing rather than saying, boys, I told you to be quiet.
Yelling.
Because, of course, yes, exactly. Doing exactly what she doesn't want them to do. She walked over again and said, boys, remember I asked you to have your indoor voices. She left it short, sweet, simple, and went back to her thing. I was so impressed with that.
Yeah. And she was willing to stop what she was doing and walk over.
Yes,
And
yes,
folks, parenting sometimes is inconvenient to do the right thing, to do the effective thing,
right.
and she kept her voice calm and respectful. And yeah, sometimes you have to be a broken record, but kids forget,
Right.
and yeah, and that's what she did. She acknowledged the difficulty of remembering you
Yeah,
have inside voice when you're outside.
yeah. And in a way, it was a big ask because when kids are outside and in a field of blueberries, oh my gosh, let me run. What are we
Yeah.
doing here?
Yeah.
But what she was doing was also showing them how to show respect to others, not just her, but others, and being aware of the situation. So, anyway, the fact that I was actually there to experience all this was wonderful. I use that example. I wonder if this woman knows what a great example she was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. All right, moving on. The next topic is humor. And like I said at the beginning, this is one of the topics I think gets left behind in many parenting books. And I'm not just talking about dad jokes, although they are wonderful. In a parenting workshop series that I just recently completed, one of the dads mentioned that this is really one of the things that when things are going tough at home, if he can remember a good dad joke, it does wonders. Humor breaks the mood. You know, if you're having a tough mood, a tough day, somebody woke up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak, humor can really make a difference. Oh my gosh. It also helps because it gets the child attention. This isn't you asking them a question or telling them to do something. That kind of snaps. I've actually done my own research, not formal research, but I've worked, like I mentioned at the beginning, at various levels of schooling. I've done this with 2-year-olds. I've done it with kindergartners. I've done it with elementary, high schoolers. I've even done it in the college classes that I teach, using some sort of humor. And it's interesting. I notice I get eye contact when I use humor. I get a look like, is she serious? Well, now I've got them paying attention, right? Does she know that sounded funny? Yes, most of the time I do. In the book, I talk about how I used to intentionally mix around words. So if one of the boys would say, I'm going to go take a shower, I'd say, all right, yep, time to shake a tower, and just switch it around. Something as silly as that, just the silliness, kind of it creates a connection. I tell parents, think about who you enjoy being with. And it's not this straight-faced, serious person all the time. They are enjoyable, don't get me wrong. They can be enjoyable. But we do enjoy people that make us laugh or that make us feel positive or whatever. So that's what the humor is really all about. Humor is also a stress reliever. When we all laugh, in fact, I don't know how many of you have heard of laughter yoga, but the action of laughing is actually a physical action, and it releases some of the tension in our body. It helps the endorphins, and it helps us get a deep breath. And honestly, sometimes all of us just need to take a deep breath, right? So as you see here, I've put be a half parent. So there's another acronym. Humor, amusement, laughter, fun. When we incorporate those things, and literally every day try to incorporate those things, that can really help that connection with your child. And honestly, humor is, it's a great cognitive skill as well. So the better that your kids get at recognizing jokes and double entendres, unfortunately, as they get older, the sarcasm gets thrown in there. Hopefully not until much, much older. But all of those are really actually skill builders too. So let me just check and
Well,
see if
and
there
I
was
was
anything.
actually I was actually going to ask you about that of if someone isn't kind of naturally funny, if there's a way of kind of developing that. And I have one other follow-up question to that, but like what suggestions do you have? I see my 8-year-old granddaughter, and her parents are very funny, especially his father is really funny. I mean, and he does voices, and like she even at 6, is practicing her voices and all this kind of stuff. But I notice her trying to make jokes, and of course sometimes she kind of misses the mark a bit. But I was raised in a very serious family, and it's not that I don't have a sense of humor, but it's taken me a long time, and mostly when I'm presenting, of kind of finding funny ways of saying things. Not that I'm telling jokes, but of
Yeah.
kind of finding what's right for me. But it can take a while. So like, do you have any suggestions for kind of developing your funny bone a little bit?
Yeah, that's actually a really, really good question. I've had parents tell me that before. There is nothing funny about me. I don't know anything funny. I don't know good jokes. The humor is an all-encompassing umbrella kind of thing. So, just even being aware to find the lighter side of things. If you're not a funny person, yeah, trying to tell jokes. I can't remember a joke to save my
Yeah.
soul. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even do the why did the chicken cross the road jokes, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm terrible at it, but I can come up with funny things on the spur of the moment. Did my kids always laugh? Heck no.
Yeah.
In fact, half the time I would get the demonstrative eye roll,
Right.
right? But that was still enough.
And
Um,
it lightened
ex-
the situation. I would have to say I was a goofball. Like that was kind of, as a parent, I was kind of goofball. Like if there was something that wasn't pleasant, there's a
yeah,
saying, I don't know if you've ever heard it, if the worst thing you have to do today is eat a frog, eat the frog first. The rest of your day will be easy. And there are times where you got to eat frogs through the day. You know, nobody likes
right,
cleaning their room. Nobody like, you know, so how can
right,
we make it fun? You know, so the fun
exactly.
piece of that, or I would make up songs, or you know, and I also would do. It is still within our family a known word of chicken poos instead of pick and choose. Well, you're welcome to chicken poos. So,
Yes,
you
yeah,
know,
that's
little things like that
perfect.
that stick.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's one of the reasons I gave the example of me switching around the words. One of the other things that my dad did for us as we were growing up is he would change the words in the book. As he was reading us a bedtime story, he would change the words. Maybe it was our name, maybe it was some silly name, maybe it was some made up place they went, whatever. Any of those can be in that amusing, funny, humorous, laughing kind of way. Even if, okay, even if there's somebody listening, they say, yeah, I can't even do any of that, then find movies or appropriate shows on TV that make you all laugh. Then at least it's something that's bringing in the laughter or the lightheartedness in the day. So it
Yeah.
is kind of one of those. You do have to practice a little bit, find what works, um, and then I mean maybe even just Google good dad jokes, good mom jokes, whatever, and just give it a try.
I recently did that. You all know I train foster parents and I also coach them. And I'm coaching a foster mom. She's foster adoptive, and her child was severely traumatized. And this little girl really demands a lot of attention. And
Yeah, I bet.
sometimes she demands attention in inappropriate ways. Well, she'll come in and she'll be very loud and she'll be very silly, wanting to get laughter, but she's doing it in kind of inappropriate ways. And so we were brainstorming. I said, well, you know, can you imagine what Robin Williams, Jim Carrey, imagine what they were like as children and what their behavior might have been like for their parents.
Yeah,
Somehow they were able to not kind of crush the spirit, but direct and kind of channel that funny bone to be appropriate. I'm sure they got kicked out of a lot of classes for being the class clown, but that was all before they became billionaires, you know, millionaires with their humor.
right,
So we
right.
actually looked at, I went out and we looked at, are there some funny female, because I also thought it might be an empowering thing to see female comedians, or
Yeah,
are there, you know, so we kind of brainstormed ways that her child could that she could support her child in being funny, but help her master being more appropriate at it.
yeah, yeah. And to your point, it does take a little bit of skill and a little bit of practice. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but just having humor kind of somewhere in the forefront of your mind, especially if you yourself are having a bad day. That might be the
yes,
best time. What makes me laugh? Because ultimately, that will be better for my children if I can lighten up just a little bit. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Now,
So,
if I can ask for just 1 minute, if you would spend 1 minute on for parents who think that they're being funny with sarcasm or
oh,
kind of the put downs, and they mean it to be funny, but I think some kids in some ages are definitely more linear, logical, and literal, but then there's also some personality temperaments that tend to be like, my grandmother was very sarcastic and I was quite offended and hurt by a lot of the things that she said, and then
yeah.
she would say, oh, what's the matter with you, you don't have a sense of humor, which was just another put down.
Right.
So can you address that just a little bit?
Yeah, and actually, that's a really good question. I do talk about that in the book. Humor has to be age appropriate. Sarcasm really isn't appropriate until they are in the real rational um, front brain, higher level thinking. For that very reason, your example is perfect, spot on. Would you understand it now? Yes. But would you appreciate it now? You probably still wouldn't, right?
Hmm.
So you do have to understand what works for the child. Of our three sons, one of them, we could use sarcasm and he would be just fine. Now, mind you, all of our sons are in their 30s. My husband's sense of humor is sarcasm. So as they got to be teens, that made much better sense. But when they're younger than the teenage level, sarcasm, um, children up through elementary really are in this right versus wrong, black versus white kind of thinking. So sarcasm depends so much on underlying things that you really do run the risk of offending the child or confusing them. And then your humor didn't work. The purpose of humor is to be fun and enjoyable. And
Yeah.
if you can tell from what you've said, your child's face does not show joy, do not use that kind of humor because it does not work for them.
Well,
But what works for one might work for what doesn't work for one might work for the other.
yeah.
So
I also notice there's two different kinds of sarcasm. One is kind of just a dry wit that is looking at the at a different side of things, but it's not laughing at anyone and it's not a personal put down. There are
yes,
people who make personal put downs and then think it's funny and that you
yeah,
are going to laugh at being put down. And that, like, I don't think ever, no matter where your brain development is, I don't think that's ever like really helpful. Whereas that dry wit sense of humor of, or being able to say, oh yeah, right, that kind of sarcasm. And if you're kind of dramatic in your facial expressions or something, kids can get
yes,
that, or if you're silly or whatever. But yeah, I think
yes.
there are some that are, I still to this day don't find some kinds of sense of humor funny.
No, and
Sarcasm. Yeah.
exactly. Put downs are not a way to enrich a relationship with a child, no
There you
matter
go.
how old they are.
Yeah.
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 So good point. Good
Yeah.
point. So just for listeners, if especially if this is difficult for you, just be thinking of something fun you can do this week with your family, just to start that process. And if it happens to be funny as well, that sounds great. So, all right, the next section is happiness. And sorry to start with this chart, it's probably going to be a little bit difficult to read, but this information comes from Martin Seligman, who wrote Authentic Happiness. And his first iteration was actually PERMA, so you might have heard of PERMA. He added the V for vitality, which I am very glad because vitality is really your physical body. Are you eating well? Are you moving regularly? Are you sleeping deeply? Your mental and physical health, which I actually talk about in my book in the health section. But the PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement, all add together to give us a level of happiness. That does not mean we want to be happy all the time or that that's our goal. Only what makes me happy is my goal. No, that's not what we're talking about, because that really doesn't allow true expression of your emotions and all the emotions that we have. And it actually ends up overlooking those negatives that we just talked about.
I've heard the term recently, toxic positivity, which
Yes.
is being positive to the extent, to the extreme of not allowing yourself to ever feel those negative emotions or work through them.
And what does that happen? What happens from that is that everything bubbles up and then bursts out.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Or
So the
just
goal
shut
is not,
down.
or yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, until you blow.
Yeah.
So the idea is not to be happy all the time. But obviously, like I said at the beginning, I love ending with happiness as being something that parents need to aim for. How does it feel living in your family? Do the children, can they say, yeah, I'm happy, mom or dad is always on me to, pick up clothes off my floor. But in general, how does it feel to be in your family? How does it feel as a parent to be in your family? So the positive emotions, we do want to highlight those. We want that balance, as they say here, of heartfelt positivity to build our resilience. So staying positive when we can and looking at things, working with them to aim for that. The engagement is really using our strengths, but also helping our children use their strengths so that they're fully engaged in something. I remember reading somewhere that if you're not sure what your child is really good at, what is their strength, pay attention to what they're doing when they don't answer a question from you, because that means they're in flow. They're kind of in the zone. So, whatever it is that they're doing at that time, that's a strength. And focusing on that helps them be engaged. And when we allow them to be engaged in what it is that they enjoy doing, that adds to their happiness. Relationships, I don't need to say much about that. That's what this whole book is about, really. And positive quality, connected relationships are definitely geared towards happiness. Meaning, I love this one in this particular context with relationships with your child. As your child grows, talking with them about how they feel about certain things. Well, what do you think about life? I mean, as silly as that sounds, that's a great question. Well, what do you think? If that had happened to you, what do you think you would have done? Helping them talk through some of these things. Well, what do you think happens after people die? You know, that gives them meaning. It gives them practice finding out what they think makes sense. And as we add meaning to our own lives and they figure out meaning for them, that adds to the happiness. And the last one
It
is
really
achievement.
deepens things too, kind of taking things to a
Yeah.
deeper level. And also I think a lot of times we do a really great job, and we all do it sometimes more intentionally than others, of passing on our belief systems in a more programmatic, programming kind of a way,
Yeah.
which then
Yeah.
creates sometimes unintentional, those subconscious tapes that play that aren't always positive. So be if you're going to
Right.
ask a question like that, be also open to hearing where they're at today in this moment, because that could
Right.
be very different from where they end up as adults. I know sometimes parents get very worried about what their preteens or teens are talking about. Well, that doesn't mean that's where they're going to land in adulthood. That's
Right.
maybe tying in with the identity one, of kind of
Right.
figuring out what do I believe about things. And so it also develops that prefrontal cortex too of, that's
Yes.
that critical thinking there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And that's a great point. I mean, it's kind of like asking the 4-year-old, "What do you want to be when you grow up?"
Yeah.
and expecting them to do that, right?
Right.
The more we can ask, not that we need to every year. Okay, so how about this year? What do you want to be when you grow up? I'm not saying that, but the more we do talk to them and allow them that fluidity of, yeah, last year this is what I thought, but you know what? My friends are saying this. And I kind of agree with that because that actually shows openness on our part, which helps our child grow. Because the ultimate is, as I say in my book, they are our children, but for a moment, and then they are the world's adults.
Yeah.
So we can share what our values and thoughts and meanings are, but they are a different person. So,
And accepting or is different than approving and allowing. If you don't approve of what they're doing, or you think there's a safety issue or it's unhealthy, you may not allow it. But there's still an important, but anytime you forbid something, you've just made it more interesting and you're tempting to get
yeah,
rebellion. So there really is value in investigating what is driving them to look at it. What is it that they're trying to accomplish or get from that? And then is there something healthier or safer that they could get that without doing it this way? And that's how maybe also tying into the redirect part of it.
oh, yes, definitely. And the reasoning part of it, too.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, you can really talk it through and find out, oh, now I get why you were doing that. Now I understand. So the achievement, excuse me, the A, the self-belief and ability to pursue and accomplish goals. If we support our child, it's a lot in this meaning that we're talking about, but if we support them and say, hey, you can do this, look at their strengths, um, talk about expressing those emotions. I mean, it all kind of comes together in that achievement. And when they can feel a sense of achievement, um, They have similar feelings to how we feel when we achieve something. Proud of ourselves, builds our self esteem, um, helps them become resilient, helps them know what to do next time. All those things kind of come together a little bit better or whatever. So again, this whole happiness topic doesn't mean this is what we're constantly focusing on, but taking it in the concept of everything individual and collective, ending up towards happiness. So to gear towards that happiness, some of the things you can try is the what went well, the WWW. So you can ask before bed, at dinner time, whenever you gather as a family, what went well in your day today. This would most likely, obviously, because of the way it's worded, be best at the end of the day. You probably don't want to do a what went well at 10 o'clock in the morning. So same thing with three good things. Take turns telling each other three good things that happened in your day. My son and daughter-in-law do a highs and lows around their dinner table. Now, she's almost 3 and he's almost 5. So 3 and 5-year-old are learning to look at those highs and lows for the day. What was your high today? In fact, I have to tell you, I was almost in tears when we visited last time and they did the highs and lows, and they came around to the 3-year-old granddaughter. And mom said, "What was your high today?" And she looks around the table and she goes, "Oma and Opa." And it was just like, oh my gosh, that was just so cute. So anyway, the highs and lows. Now, some people might say, well, yeah, but then you're talking about the lows. Well, remember what we talked about incorporating negatives.
Mm-hmm.
We all have lows. Avoiding those is avoiding real life.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your low? Well, my low was whatever, fill in the blank. Oh, so how can we help you with that? How can we support you? What do you think you're going to do different next time? Now you talk through what that low was, and that's the whole point of incorporating negatives. So
Mm-hmm.
focus on your child's strengths, help them build their resilience and self-esteem, have fun together, show them you love them with your words and your actions. I think it's easy to say, okay, good night, love you, rolls off the tongue, but did I show them I loved them? It has to be in our actions too. And then spending quality time together. My doctoral dissertation research was on the value of family vacation and family cohesion. And they are so very connected. Vacations, no matter what you call a vacation, it can even be all going to the lake for the afternoon. That spending time together is very quality too. So,
And where
so
we
that's
put our time is a reflection of what we value. You
yeah.
know, if we're too busy for our kids, and our phone is more important or our job
Uh,
always is more important, that's not that you can't do something because you have a conflicting appointment, but you make the effort to do whatever that is and to make the time. If your parent is always too busy for you, that really affects their self-esteem.
yeah.
That I'm not important enough. The phone was always more important, time than me.
Yeah. In fact, as you were saying that reminded me of a situation my husband and I experienced, and this was pre-COVID, unfortunately. Um, we were out to dinner, don't remember where, sitting enjoying, kind of watching around. It was crowded. And across from us was a table, two parents, and I think it was two girls. And I'm going to say they were maybe 8 and 10, or maybe 6 and 8, something like that. Every single person at that table, all four of them had their own iPads.
Yeah,
Everybody was watching something separate on their own iPad.
yeah,
I am not anti screen, but when you have decided the family is going out for an activity together, that is not together
yeah.
in my mind. So definitely quality time is the key.
Yeah. And I can see, especially in this day and age, 2 and 3 year olds who haven't had much, especially COVID babies. We've got a grandchild who's a COVID baby, and the
Yeah.
first time that he went to a restaurant is when we went to Disney, and it was a really nice restaurant where he needed to sit still. So it
Oh,
was like, okay, we didn't get an opportunity to practice being in a restaurant. So,
yeah.
they did rely a little bit more on screens than they normally, because they are very much they're kind of more
Yes.
anti-screen and limited and all that good stuff. But yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
quality
And that's
time
a
matters.
right. Well, and that's a great example, Jody, where everybody has to make this work. We can talk about these ideas and strategies, but all parents have to make this fit for what fits best for their child's temperament, and the situation. So,
And
yeah.
and let me just kind of make a final kind of blanket statement. I mean, if you want to go ahead and put some information up on how folks get, yeah, there you go. Um, just a kind of an overall comment, and the last thing you said, that's one of the things I appreciated about this book is that it 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 like I said in the beginning in terms of kind of being balanced, but the thing about being balanced is that within the balanced zone there's so many ways that we can individualize our parenting to meet the needs of each individual child but still be within the balanced zone, that balanced parenting style. And Debbie did a really great job of here's kind of what this is, and here's what it looks like, and then giving specific examples that show with different ages of children or issues how you can still kind of achieve that so that you can really master the skill, but incorporate that and use it in a way that really works for your family.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, I use the example of the pool table and all the pool balls. You know, it, everybody affects everybody else, and you have to kind of know what this one ball is going to do to affect this one over here is possibly going to be different than how it would affect the other ball. So anyway, yeah. So
exactly.
there's my information, my email address, my website, Flourishing Families, a picture of the book, and the link to Amazon. I'm trying to get it in as many local places as I can, which should be fairly soon. So, anyway, thank you so much, Jody, for this opportunity. I so much appreciate it.
Well, and I'm so excited for you. Congratulations on finishing your book, on launching that. I wish you all the greatest success. We're going to put this as a public video on our The Parents Tool Shop YouTube
Great.
channel. So feel free to like it, share it, and spread the word. So
Very good.
thank you so much. And thanks everybody for watching us. And we'll see you next time on our Parents Tool Talk webinar. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.